later. But awesome. I will kick us off here and I'll ask our team to watch the proverbial Zoom doors as we get started. But thank you all for joining us today for this workshop. This is a workshop on building company culture and building that culture that's your sustainable competitive advantage. And we're really excited to have Josh Levine, who will be further introduced by one of our team members today. But wanted to start briefly by introducing myself. My name is Cameron Law. I serve as the Executive Director here at the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. If you're, and I'm joined by two of our colleagues. We have Arlene Miranda, which can give the virtual wave here, and she heads up our operations and marketing. And then we have Brian Gladden, who's one of our entrepreneurs and residents and leads many of our training sessions. And we're excited to have them both here. And for those of you that don't know about the Carlson Center, we serve as a regional hub and platform for providing approachable and accessible entrepreneurial education, community, and support to enable startup founders of all backgrounds to scale and launch their businesses. And we're really on this mission to make innovation and entrepreneurship pervasive throughout the greater Sacramento region and have this, holistic vision of the Sacramento region being a premier hub for innovation and entrepreneurship. So we know some of you aren't in Sacramento, but we would love to connect you to our ecosystem and see how Sacramento might be the home for your scaling ventures or support. This offering is one of our kind of areas which we call our Discover sets of programs. So we bring in content experts to share tools, frameworks, and mindsets to help you as scaling businesses or startups to get the support you need to be successful as founders. And so we're excited to dive into culture, which is foundation to building a solid company and organization. So I'll turn it over to Brian, who's going to be introducing Josh, who's leading our workshop today, but we really appreciate you all being here. We will be using the chat feature throughout the session today, so please use that for any questions that you might have as we're going forward. And as a starter, would love for you to share where you're joining and what you're excited to learn today from Josh. So take it away, Brian.
Thanks, Cameron. Welcome, everybody. It's going to be we should say great Monday, but it's going to be a great Wednesday. So I'm happy to have happy to have Josh here with us. So my role, as Cameron said, is the entrepreneur in residence, basically creating programs and doing webinars and trainings. But many times I'd rather bring in someone that's an expert and deep dive into a specific topic. And today I'm really excited to have Josh with us, who has helped us before. And I'm really excited because of his work and his book, his company. And if you don't know Josh, definitely get connected to him on LinkedIn and follow him. But he's the founder and CEO of Great Mondays. He's an educator, designer, author, obviously, of the book you see in the bottom right down there, Great Mondays, and we'll dig into that. And he also helps organizations design culture. He writes for Forbes, for Fast Company, Huffington Post, Design Management Journal. He teaches design at the California College of the Arts. He has been a founder, was a founder, co-founder of Culture Lab X, that has chapters across the country, and been helping firms for more than 15 years create that culture that they want. And this book, Great Mondays, I'm a big fan, as you can see on my bookshelf behind me there, right in the middle. The culture design canvas that I'm sure Josh will talk about is a big part of that. And I use it in my consulting. So I'm going to turn it over to the expert. Very happy Josh is with us. So Josh Levine, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys. So let me, if you unshare, I will share my screen. Thanks, everybody. Good to be here. Let me see if I can get my screen up and going. Is this look good? Thumbs up. Awesome. Thanks. All right. So company culture. If you want to build a ship, don't gather people to collect together wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the immensity of the sea. This quote was really what solidified my passion and desire and belief in the idea of culture in business and what it means. It's really, to me, this is ultimately what I hope to I hope that the majority of organizations can subscribe to this idea, which is that if we're able to articulate a clear and compelling message around why we exist and how we want to get there, then we can create organizations that are agile, nimble, responsive, and as innovative as we're all trying to be. And this to me is kind of the antithesis of micromanagement. There's really no way to manage to like micromanage our way in business today, and we'll talk about why. But I wanted to really just start with this concept to kind of frame the whole thing up. If it has to come back to one thing, it's this. I started as a designer and a brand strategist, and 15 years ago I had the opportunity to kind of sit back and think, what is it that people really need? And I felt that I needed to help organizations actually deliver on those brand promises that I was trying to help them make. And realized they weren't able to do that because the employees were not on board. They didn't understand what that brand promise meant and how they were supposed to deliver it. So that's how I ended up thinking about company culture in this kind of in this way. Now, we're going to start the big question that we want to answer today. Two big questions. Why culture? Why now? And I created that. I sort of framed my talks like that even before the pandemic, but it feels even more important, right? It's only gotten more, the answer has only gotten more compelling as we've proceeded through kind of this new world of work. So the way businesses are operating, it's a constant acceleration. The pandemic, like I said, has sort of thrown things into disarray. Are you hybrid? Are you distributed? How do we do this? People are leaving. Our competitors are hiring from overseas, or they're hiring away our best engineers or our best talent. And what do we do? How do we do this? This all started with the sort of this great acceleration. Started with the computer chip, but I think it's been amplified. This computer chip is now, the computers have allowed us to really be able to create distributed communities that allow us to achieve something together. And this is really the kind of the future state of business, which doesn't work in the old style. It doesn't work in the command and control top-down hierarchy of the 20th century. As a matter of fact, the kind of leading thinking, the leading concept of what it is, how to define this, came from the military, where command and control started. But in the 70s, as the Cold War was sort of winding down, the U.S. military established this observation that that the field of battle is in a state of VUCA. VUCA is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So, I mean, it does feel often day to day that we are, kind of in the trenches when it comes to business, and everything there's no playbook anymore. You can't say, line up over here and head that direction. You've got to give the people on the front lines, I'm drawing this parallel, people on the front lines, the ability to make these decisions, because this is what we face. This is the state of business. Before, let's say 20 years ago, we could talk about culture, and culture would come up once in a while. And when it was about culture change of some sort of change, we're going to have a reorg is kind of often that instance. And so it was this, you'd hire a big consulting firm. Why would what is going to happen? You tell everybody there's going to be a reorg. Here it comes, and boom, it's here. Everything's switched. You just report to new people. Maybe you sit in new cubicles. And then you kind of have this, traumatic event, but then you're able to, 6 months, it becomes a little bit of a distant memory, and everybody gets back to working in the way that they want to. But that's no longer, that was a blessing. And now culture change is really a constant. It's something that's happening all the time. So much so that it's almost like it's like every quarter is a reorg, but we don't even call it a reorg. You're on a new project team. And it's like you're working with new people, or you kind of report to this person, but maybe you have another manager that you're talking to, and it's just change all the time. And as humans, we like a certain level of consistency. So there's a lot of struggle here. And to me, what we need to do is learn how to deal with this. And we're going to do that with culture as that operating system. So it is something that has always been there and always will be there. But now we have to actually step back and go, oh, look at that. How do we want to use this tool? How do we want to use this tool? All right, so I'm going to hit pause on the kind of evolution of what of where we are and zoom out to define culture. So the first question that I asked when I was transitioning from being a brand strategist into let's call it a culture strategist, or focusing on brand to focusing on culture. What is culture? Well, the first thing I'll tell you is what it's not. It's not ping pong and pizza. This was the place that I started, which was in Silicon Valley in the mid 2000s. Everybody was talking about how they had a great culture because you could bring your pet to work, or we would do your dry cleaning, or we have an on-site barista. And to me, it was just so apparent that they were trying to impact culture, but that was not how you could do it. That was a reactive way of doing that. So, okay, so if it's not that, what is it? Let's look at a dictionary definition. The third bullet here, I think, is closest to a way of thinking, behaving, or working that exists in a place or organization, such as a business. All right, that's fine. I don't think that's wrong, but for me, it's not as, it doesn't reveal kind of the central structure or tenet of why culture is so challenging to define and control, which is that it's a system. And so I like to articulate culture like this. I like to define it this way. It's the cause and effect of every choice you make. And it's the cause and effect because it is a self-reinforcing cycle. Choices, if there's one thing you want to take away from today, it's that culture is important. Culture is why we're talking about culture, because it impacts, influences the choices we make. That's why it's so important. That's why it's the operating system. And if someone makes a choice that makes me feel secure and confident and positive, then I'm more likely to make a better choice when in the next interaction I might have with somebody else, or a better strategic decision. If it is clear to me what we are trying to do and how we're trying to do it, then I'm going to be able to do it better. That is the upward promise of culture. It's why culture is really hard to get right, because it's a big ship that you have to turn a little at a time. But once you do, it becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. On the other hand, if you have a negative culture, if you have a culture of whatever it might be, intimidation or scarcity or something like that, then it is a self-fulfilling prophecy in the other direction. Culture is very powerful, but it depends on how you wield it. Now, what I've just described around choices is really this construct that business is a decision-making machine. I don't care how many algorithms are running without you touching it. There's still people making those decisions. still implementing or not. It is still about people. We may be able to have, organizations may be able to have greater impact with a smaller number of humans, but you still have humans making decisions. So this is what it ends up looking like. And so the question becomes, how do we get those choices to be moving in the right direction so that we can have a positive, productive culture that gets us to where we want to go? Now, I'll take a moment here because this is usually where someone will inquire about what is a good or bad culture. I would say that I try to take a neutral position. Philosophically, there is no such thing as, it's not that you don't have a culture. Everybody has a culture, whether you pay attention to it or not. Okay. And it's not that a culture is good or bad. The market will tell you that if you achieve your goals. We are still talking about businesses. We are still talking about capitalism and the power of that. Now, would I go and work for Amazon? No, I would not. Is Amazon successful? Yes, it is. Amazon, I don't know firsthand, but as we have read over a number of articles and a number of exposés, is notoriously rigorous. As a matter of fact, sort of the Bezosian way of thinking is customers first. And to me, that skips over the key element of the employee. But it's successful. So you have to choose for yourself what kind of organization you want to work for. Is it good or is it bad? That's up to you. Now, it can be aligned or misaligned. If I'm telling you we want to be really innovative, but then not supportive of people making mistakes, that's not aligned. So I just wanted to I wanted to lay that out there because that's always a question that comes. Do we have a good culture? I can't tell you that. It depends. Now, if I haven't convinced you yet that culture is one of the most important business tools for the 21st century, I want to share with you one other benefit, which is culture can't be stolen or copied. Unlike features, unlike IP, unlike market share, unlike talent, if you try to take someone's culture for your own, it will not be authentic and it will not work. Everyone's culture, every organization's culture is going to be different. You can learn from reading the book on Google culture, but that's not necessarily, you can't just go, okay, I'll take it. When I have clients that go, we want to be like Amazon, we want to be customer centric. Okay, fair. That's fine. That's a nice outcome. But we have to make specific decisions about how you run your business and how this business runs, because it is not Amazon. This, to me, the combination of all those ideas, why this is important, what the state of business is, the fact that it is this incredible opportunity to really build a long-term benefit for the organization. This is why I like to articulate that I believe culture is the only sustainable competitive advantage in business today. The only sustainable competitive advantage in business today. It can't be stolen and it can't be copied. And if you get it right, it is going to last for a long time. What happens if it doesn't? What happens if you have a culture that is misaligned or not thoroughly thought through, or an organization that whose tactics are not aligned? you get problems. And if you get it wrong, you're going to have a situation where you have the employees making decisions that hurt the business. So about 10 years ago, you might remember there was a small kerfuffle on a United flight. It was overbooked. It was the last flight of the night. And they had to get 3 of their staff, I think it was 1 pilot and 2 flight attendants, to the next hub. And so what usually happens, and we've all been there, we've overbooked the flight. We're offering a $250 flight voucher. And no one got off. No one raised their hand. We're like, well, okay. We're now offering a $500 flight voucher. And they probably got 1 taker. And they got up to $800 flight voucher. This was the maximum amount of money that they could offer. And I think they got 2 people to take it. Completely packed. They still needed to get one of their staff to the next hub, or else they wouldn't be able to fly out. They were going to delay a flight entirely. They were unable to offer more than $800. And so they had to randomly choose and force someone off the plane. There are videos of this incident when they had flight marshals come onto the plane, and I don't know how they chose, but it was, I think his name was Dr. Wang, and he, I don't know, he was chosen. He had to get to the next thing, but he didn't want to, and they forced him off. He got like a concussion and like scraped his eyes, and they were like forcing him off. That is not a good look. This incident was a PR nightmare. Clearly not thought through. Why? Because the level of autonomy, trust was not enough. And they were working in the old command and control way. Here are the rules. There's lots of rules and regulations for airlines. I appreciate that. It's a very safe industry because of that. But I would argue in this case, they needed to give their staff more authority to provide more incentives. Now, what I usually do in my classes is I'll have people raise their hand. I said, let's do a thought experiment. Let's say you had to get to the next city. This was the last flight out. You had the most important presentation of your life. Would you have taken a $2,000 flight voucher? Raise your hand. Nobody. Okay, $5,000 flight voucher. People are like, probably not. All right, let's up the ante. A $50,000 flight voucher, would you? Sometimes someone might raise their hand. I was like, all right, $150,000 flight voucher. That experiment usually have a few people at least by $150,000. Okay. That very thought would, if they could do that, it's an extraordinary amount of money, but they lost millions of dollars in market cap when this came out. PR incident. The CEO was under fire. The CEO had to, he wrote a letter, and it was like kind of not our fault, and it was like made it even worse. So like, okay, $100,000 flight voucher, let's do it. You know what I mean? Like, get them off. Of course, hindsight. But the point is it's still a possibility. I bet we could have gotten someone off that plane for a couple $1,000s. This concept, and there's a bunch of other stories that I have like this, when it's like your culture really just takes a nosedive, and there's just an incident that happens where you're like, oops, that shouldn't happen again. That shouldn't happen anymore. To me, this is a culture problem, and this is why we can't leave culture to chance. If you think that's an anomaly, I'll give you one more example, although there's many. about 5 years ago, maybe, Wells Fargo, one of the country's largest banks, got in some legal trouble because it was found out that their bankers, their customer bankers, customer facing bankers, were opening pervasively, multiple times, a lot of them across the country, opening false or unauthorized accounts. False or unauthorized accounts. Now, why would they do that? Did they hire hundreds of unethical customer facing bankers? No, they didn't. I don't think these people were ill intentioned. But what happened was that someone at the top said, we need to have a really good quarter or a really good year. We need more market activity. We need more banking activity. We need more accounts. So I want you to dial it up. And then at some point, they just kept turning the screws, whether it was through incentives. Hey, the person who can open up the most accounts gets a trip to Bahamas, or disincentives. If you don't open up more accounts, you're not going to get promoted. Something happened there where everybody felt compelled to tweak the numbers, to tweak the outcome. They didn't say, improve your relationships with your customers, build trust. They were like, we got to get this done now. And so they just started doing it. Someone was like, I just did this. This is going to get your numbers up. And now they're in legal trouble. And they've had to reform and they've had to change and create policies. This is clearly a culture issue. Clearly a culture issue. And that is why you don't want to wait until a crisis to pay attention to your culture. In order to think about how do you design and manage your culture in a way that not only prevents bad incidents, but actually elevates the capacity of your employees to make great decisions and accelerate the success of the business. So I'm going to pause there, and what I want to do next. But before I do, maybe we can take some questions. The next part is going to all be about how to actually do this, and I'm going to talk to you through the 6 components of culture. But I think maybe we can take some. If you have some questions, if you want to type them in the chat box, we can answer a few questions before we move on. That way, it feels a little more give and take. And I could take a break from talking for just a second.
Josh, there was one question. Do you know a resource where they could tap into to access culture case studies? So you referred to the United experience. I know obviously maybe you pulled those from news.
Yeah.
But curious if you know of any case studies or a place to go for that.
Yeah, I just kind of collect them as they show up. I don't know. That's a good question. That sounds like a nice opportunity. I don't have a quick answer. I do pull a lot of articles from the Harvard Business Review that I share with my my students. Though that is always a very well vetted, well written examples, and they're usually positive. Because sometimes they're written by the CEOs themselves, but I think there's a lot of good stuff there. As far as like negative case studies, I don't know that anybody's collecting that, although that could be a nice snarky website. I kind of like that maybe. Miss T, I think maybe we should go in on creating a snarky when culture goes wrong case study collection.
Very good.
I'm going to laugh on that one too. This is Miss T.
All right, Miss T. I like it. Okay. Any other questions you want to that kind of came up for you in this first section before we get into the hows and the whats? It all makes perfect sense. All right. I mean, I guess that's a good sign. I don't know.
I'm sure there'll be more questions as we move on. We'll keep,
All right.
We'll keep
All
an
right.
eye out.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Yeah. You just hail me, right? Let me know. Okie dokie. Let's keep going then. All right. Okay, Josh. Let's say you're saying you've convinced me. Culture is something we need to focus on. Culture is not this quarter or this year's goal, and then we're done. This was kind of the mentality that a lot of my clients early on would have. Hey, can we just check off, especially the engineering firms or firms run by startups run by engineers? We have this on our list of things to do. We have this right here is an item, culture or values, and we'd like to check that off. Can you help us get it done? The response is, can you imagine if the CFO walked into a board meeting and said, all right, everybody, we've solved finance. I'll see you next time. I'm going to take some vacation. That is what I hope is that in 5 years or 10 years, someone could say, isn't it ridiculous that someone would used to say, hey, let's fix our culture and then get back to work. And everybody goes, ha, 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 that's ridiculous. Culture is an ongoing evolution that you cannot just, do it and then leave. You just can't. It needs constant care and attention. And I hope to see one day not culture that isn't just embedded in HR, but becomes a function unto itself. Because I gotta tell you, the number of times that my clients go, whoa, this is a lot to deal with. I don't know that I can do this. I've got so many other things. You cannot do culture off the side of your desk. You cannot. So to me, that's really my goal and my aspiration. Pedro has a question I see. How can the employees can help strengthen the corporate culture that is decided by the management? Okay, perfect. That's exactly the follow-up to that little anecdote that I just told. Every employee has a sphere of influence. Now, it is obviously a lot easier if your CEO or board or executive team really has their act together and has created a culture that is clear and compelling and makes a lot of sense. You can follow those guidelines. You can say, I'm going to internalize this, I'm going to take this and make it mine. That's what happens in the best of situations, where you actually work with your team to implement what the vision that the leadership has articulated. If they haven't articulated it, or they are unaware that they need to, or it's just crappy, then you have to put in the effort and actually create the culture in your own group, in your own organization. If you are a manager of a team of 12, that is your job. Your job isn't to be an information hub, routing questions and solving problems. Your job is to set the ground rules and the principles for how your team works. Even if you're not the manager, you have influence. You can choose to act in a certain way. It is not easy, but it is the right thing to do. And you have to have your own North Star and your own principles. So why don't we get into what the structure is? This is what I call the components of culture. So this was the second question I had when I started this journey. Number one was, what is the definition of culture? The hell is it? And the second is, okay, great. Now what? What do we do? And again, that didn't exist because people were like, I know, cold brew machine and ping pong tables. That was how they reacted. I wanted to understand how a leader or a manager could take a proactive approach and look at a system and actually influence the culture before something bad happened. So here are the 6 components of culture: purpose, values, and behaviors, recognition, rituals, and cues. Purpose, values, and behaviors, recognition, rituals, and cues. Purpose, values, and behaviors are the culture design. Culture design. That's the where do we want to go? So we set up a map and we say, okay, on the map, where do we want to go? We're going to head this direction and here's the route we're going to take. Now, just because you've articulated that doesn't mean it's going to happen. So the second half is culture activation. How do you operationalize your culture? So let me take you through the 6 components. Purpose is why an organization exists beyond making money. Purpose is the peak of the mountain. Purpose should be big, lofty, the BHAG, if you will, big, hairy, audacious goal. This should be something that is hard to achieve, but inspiring. Something so big and so powerful that people are like, that sounds incredible. I want to help do that. That is the top of the mountain. Here's a few examples. Let's start with Starbucks, since everybody's familiar with Starbucks. What is their purpose? To inspire and nurture the human spirit. And then they have the how: one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. Whatever you think of the quality of Starbucks coffee, I don't think you can argue that this is a bad purpose statement. This is pretty cool. To inspire and nurture the human spirit. One person, right? So, Brian, your cappuccino's ready. Hopefully this person is going to engage with you. One cup, obviously inspire, caffeine. That's what they serve. That's their product. And one neighborhood at a time. I don't know that they always are successful, but they aspire to improve the neighborhood when they have a new store there. I think this is great. Is this something they can ever check off on the list? No. This is something that you are there to help do. I think the one below it, IKEA, to create a better everyday life for the many people. It doesn't necessarily say by selling, MDF furniture, chairs, and desks, which I think is okay. There's a couple different ways that they could do this, but to me, what's really the word here, there's 2 words that make this good. One is everyday life, and the other is many. So it's really about scale and accessibility. I think this is a pretty good one. Maybe not as good as Starbucks, but pretty good. Kellogg's, to nourish families so they can flourish and thrive. All right, that makes sense. This is all about families. I can get behind that. I'm excited about that. And then Credit Karma, which was acquired 2 years ago by Intuit, to help people be their best financial selves. This was a client that we worked with to create this. The idea here, so Credit Karma is a company that helps you understand and manage your credit scores for free, and they have a lot of other financial products that they've launched since. So I think this still works pretty well. If you are excited about helping people improve their financial lives, then this is a place that you could be. So that's purpose. I do want to answer this question because it's one that comes up a lot. You're like, come on, isn't this already answered in the mission and the vision? Do we really need another statement? So a mission statement clarifies what an organization does, for whom they do it, and how. Vision describes a concrete image of what achieving that mission will look like. And a purpose statement is meant to guide, inspire, and rally customers and employees to join a cause greater than themselves. Long for the immensity of the sea. That's what a purpose statement does. All right. So, Arlene, a great question. What is the process for arriving at an agreed upon purpose? Have I got a treat for you? I have throughout my book, as well as on my website and in a few other places, a series of exercises that an organization can go through to achieve that purpose statement. As a matter of fact, to get to the answer for each of the 6 components. So what I think is really insightful about Arlene's question is the phrase agreed upon. I can come up with a purpose statement for your company, no question. I'm a really good copywriter, very creative. Give me a couple hours and I'll figure something out for you. But that don't mean shit if you don't agree with it, if the leadership hasn't been part of that. And that is part of how we do our work. It's not that we're particularly good at writing value statements or writing purpose statements. It's that we have a process that brings people along. And that's what each of these exercises really tries to articulate for you. So I'm going to go through the components and then I'm going to share with you a few different resources that you can go to find out more about these exercises. Sound good? I'm sure Arlene is nodding her head. All right.
Thank you, Josh. Yes.
Yeah, perfect. All right. So here's the quick, pages in the back of the book just to prove that they exist. Let's keep going for the moment. All right. So now I've told you, hey, we're going to hit they're going to go to the peak of the mountain. That's where we're going. How do we make sure that our people don't go off the trail and fall into a crevasse or cheat and take the gondola? How do you articulate a path that we want to take? And the answer is values. Shared beliefs about what is most important when conducting business. Now, I'm going to tell you something that you might find surprising or heretical, which is to say that most values that businesses have suck. They're terrible. And they're terrible because they don't change. There's a previous understanding that values should be immutable. They should be permanent and enduring. And as Jill points out in the chat, typically cliche. Touche, cliche. Here's some very large organizations and their values. And then here's the ones that kind of repeat. People are conflating kind of what an individual's values are. I believe in X, Y, and Z with what an organization's values are. They should not be enduring. As a matter of fact, they should only last for a few years. Values are the 3 to 5 most important things that are going to drive or indicate what kind of behaviors you want people to prioritize that is going to move the needle for the organization for the next 3 years. You may not need to change your values in 3 years, but you should absolutely take a look at them because that can change. Values should be inspiring, they should be compelling, they should be brand aligned, they should be highly differentiated. If you're trying to hire people and they just came from a company that said integrity, respect, and excellence, and you're like, well, you come here and it's integrity, respect, and excellence. I mean, it's not bad, it's just not good. Like, what's the difference? And honestly, if you have to say that everybody here works with integrity, I mean, what's the opposite? A strategic choice is one that you make between two valid options. If you're not gonna have integrity, that should be an HR issue. That should be a management issue. That is not a value. You need to be thinking about what are the most important things. How are you going to make a difference? How are you going to move the needle? Values are brief, they're well defined, they're unique, they're limited in number, and they're actionable. The headline should be 2 to 4 words for each. They're well defined. What do they mean? What do we do? What do we not do? They're unique, like I just said. Can someone else claim them? Are they articulated in a unique way? They're limited in number. I don't want to see anybody with more than 5 values, because anything more and you're going to start forgetting them. Values, defining values, are an exercise in prioritization. If you have 13 values, one of your values needs to be prioritization. And finally, they're actionable. Do I know what I do? The culture, right? What did I say? The one thing I want you to remember is that this is about choices. This is about choices and behaviors. So if I don't know individually what I'm supposed to do because you said excellence or security or safety, that is not an effective value. Let's take a quick look at some examples. A client of ours, PagerDuty, we worked with them just before they went public. And that was one of the reasons they really wanted to get clear on their culture and their values. So these are the 5 values that we actually helped them create. That's Pagey. Pagey is for PagerDuty. I guess it's a little pager guy. They actually have one of the costumes. You can actually look up their when they went public, their day on the trading floor. Someone was there in the Pagey outfit. It's cute. So these are the 5 values: champion the customer, run together, act and own, take the lead, and bring yourself. So champion the customer is about putting users first, making it easy, and building great products. Run together is the DEI value, but what's interesting is when we first started, they're like, obviously diversity is going to be one of our values, right? And I'm like, well, I understand that it's important to you, but you guys are doing it really, really well. I don't know that you need to have diversity as the headline. What they did need help with is working together. So we created Run Together as a way of talking about relationships and teaming. Act and own. Act and own is about seeing opportunities and ownership, making it ours and doing right. Now, what does act and own mean? This to me is like, this is probably going to be the most brand aligned value that has ever been created in under my purview, which is act and own is a piece of user interface, a message that the original product used to send to developers when there was an issue. So the main value originally, what the product did was alerted a developer who was on duty that a website was going down or a database had an error and it was about to spin out of control. And so it would say, you have an error, click this button to acknowledge and own, hack and own. And that was just perfect. It came up in a meeting when we were talking about ownership and opportunities, and someone said hack and own. And everybody went, oh my God, totally. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? This is such a great storytelling opportunity. It's incredible. Take the lead, disruption, and bring yourself. trust, earning trust, having heart. And I'm going to show you very quickly Achenon. This is the one-page value framework. So each value gets this. You get a headline, you get some quick hits, what we mean, what we do, and what we don't do. And we also have a what we ask to bring it to life. All right. Behaviors. Behaviors are what we've talked about, choices made by employees that are guided by purpose and values. So this is all about making sure that purpose and values are defined by behaviors and you've articulated them. This is the center point. This is the center point. Remember, this is about that reinforcing cycle. Culture isn't shaped by one choice, by 10,000 decisions. So I will quickly go through this. Often there's implicit and explicit culture, and what you want is to be able to say it and do it. If you say it but don't do it, which many of us have worked at companies like this, it's a false promise. Hey, we do these things. And you're like, I don't trust that. Obviously, don't say, don't do. That's something that's not necessarily bad. It's just not part of our culture. Don't say, but do. These are the implicit behaviors. It could be good. They could be good. But in order for them to be effective, they need to be codified and articulated in order to scale. So I'll show you the PagerDuty. It's when we talk about how we rolled this out, run together. So that was one of the values. And so we did a manager training where we talked about what does it actually mean? How are you, Arlene, going to live this value? What does that mean for you? You commit for yourself, and then that gets recorded by your manager or in your HR file. I'm not going to tell you. I want you to understand what it is and internalize it. And then we train everybody on that. What are activation questions a senior leader takes? What is an activation question that a contributor can take? All right. Continuing on. So that's how we design. I'm going to go through activation a little bit quicker. Recognition, rituals, and cues. Okay, just because you put values up on the wall doesn't mean all of a sudden everybody goes, okay, perfect, I'm going to start acting this way. No, we've got behaviors, we got habits, we've got to change them. And so what I believe is positive reinforcement is a powerful ally. Recognition are ways that you can encourage behaviors that bring the culture to life. And what we want isn't recognition for outputs, number of bank accounts opened. We want recognition of behaviors that are driven by the values. Because that is how we really get this cycle, the spinning wheels, to reinforce. Elevate the people who are making good choices. Now, if there's someone that's making a bad choice, you can sit them down and you don't necessarily need to make that public. If there's someone that gets fired because they have broken the rules or not behaved in a way that aligns with what the organization is, you can just tell that person, and you better believe the Whisper Network is going to be telling everybody what happened, and that story is going to fly. So you don't need to say that one very, very loud, but you do need to make public and repeated acknowledgement about people who are doing who are acting in values-driven ways. The problem with most recognition program is they reward the wrong things, which is what I just described. They reward the output, number of sales made. And they use the wrong things to reward. Explicit rewards, TVs and trips to the Bahamas, that's sending the wrong message. You want implicit rewards. You want rewards that are self-reinforcing and maybe don't even have any monetary value. No one's going to say, hey, don't give me money. But what you want is to give people the opportunity to be celebrated and feel good about what they do. So the best way to achieve these goals is recognizing behaviors that lead to those results, but not the results themselves. Now I have a 2x2 framework for recognition on my website as well on my book, and I'm not going to go through those right now, but I would encourage you to ask this question: how does your company recognize good choices? All right. Let's see, Arlene, I see your question. I'm going to continue on and then we can get back to it in just a second. So I got some momentum. All right. Rituals, 2 more. We're doing great. Stick with it. Rituals. So these are recurring activities that build and strengthen relationships. Rituals build and strengthen relationships. Relationships are the synapses of culture. If we're a self-reinforcing system, relationships need to be built and strengthened in order for these behaviors to transmit across groups. Now, the problem is a company that scales is going to run into a limitation known as Dunbar's number. And Dunbar was a scientist who studied chimps and observed that most groups of chimps was limited at 150, because after that, the energy required to have a relationship was more than the benefit extracted. So the same rule applies, but because it's not life and death, it's actually much smaller for work. And I've observed it's between 50 and 100. If your organization grows to 50 or between 50 and 100 people, soon you're going to have your own little groups and your own little tribes. And you're not going to need to know who the other people are. Now, this has only been amplified by distributed work, by hybrid work. We're distributed even further. Before it was if you were on different floors, you might as well be in different buildings. Now we're across the globe. How do we get to know each other? This, to me, is the number one problem that we're going to face in the next decade when it comes to culture, is that we know our teams better, our close teams, but we don't know anybody else. And that is going to be a major problem, because without relationships, businesses would just be a pile of old laptops and ergo chairs. So that's why we need to be thinking about rituals. Now, rituals are, the classic is the holiday party. That's the one that everybody comes to, and you get to meet people, and you've got some social lubricant, and you get to connect with other people. But that's not the only way. As a matter of fact, it shouldn't just happen once a year. There's 4 different kinds of rituals that we can go through. They can be small group emergent. So things that are just a small, a few folks that have a common bond. Like the story I heard about the group of Dungeons and Dragons players at a startup. I thought that was great. There is small group explicit, where the organization actually creates the opportunity. So the company softball team, or there was a dodgeball team in dodgeball league in San Francisco amongst the design firms. Those are opportunities to connect with folks. Also, lunch and learns is a great way to do that. Trivia, even channels, hashtag, kitten channel on Slack. Those are all great ways to do it. And then what I feel like is the ideal that eventually you want to get to is large group emergent, something that is authentic to the organization, that emerges and includes a lot of people. Now, we're starting to see some of this evolution in this distributed world, but we need to be more diligent about working through that, because we're not together, and we're not going to come together very often. Love the story about the catering company in San Francisco called Zesty. One of the folks was just passionate about cheese. And every week or so, they would come in with a bunch of cheeses that they stopped by and grabbed at Whole Foods and said, hey, everybody, we're having a cheese tasting in the kitchen. And everybody would come and then they would do their cheese tasting. I was perfect, right? That's like totally authentic. Someone's passionate about food. I mean, it's great. This is a great example of something that is like brand aligned and just a beautiful example of a ritual to connect people that don't necessarily connect. All right. And then finally, cues. There's a lot of stuff that we've gotten into. I've been talking for a long time. I've laid a lot of information out to you. Imagine that you're trying to remember all this stuff. Meanwhile, your inbox is getting filled up and you've got this quarterly report and you've got a presentation that you need to give. And it's like, it's not the most important thing. Culture isn't going to be top of mind all the time. An organization needs to establish cues. These are the reminders that help people stay connected to both the culture and the future. What we're striving for. What we're striving for. The common old example of cues is that mission statement painted on the cafeteria wall. When I did work for HP in the late 90s and the early 2000s, we would go sometimes, and that was exactly what happened. They had the mission statement up on the wall. That's great. That's exactly what we need to we need to have those types of things that remind people. But of course, we don't have cafeterias anymore necessarily. And there's so many other things. What are some ways that we might be able to articulate that? So, values on your desktops. We create culture playbooks for some of our clients, and we hand them out, physical copies. We send them to them. Or swag, even the hat or the notebook. These are great ways to help people remember what they're trying to do and how they're staying connected. And you can do that with your teams as well. What are we working on? Instead of employee of the month, why don't you have a customer of the month? Because we're focused on the customer. Hey, this is Jeanette. Jeanette has this problem. This is how we help them solve that problem. Great. Let's do little case studies on the Slack channel or the company intranet. These are all ways to help organizations help people within organizations remember why they're doing what they're doing. All right. I'll give you one example of that's a lot of fun, which is one of my friends in San Francisco started a restaurant called Proposition Chicken. And Proposition Chicken only serves chicken. They serve it 3 ways: fried, flipped, or fake. So you can get the tofu. I love it because it's a limited menu. It's delicious. It's amazing. If you're in San Francisco, you should definitely go. And here he is. This is Ari. This is an incredible spot. They did great design. We worked with them to define their purpose and values. To serve the best damn chicken and pretty yummy people too. That's their purpose. And then they've got 3 values: quality for all, celebrate the yum, be the best you. This idea, these words are always on the interview guide for the person doing the interviewing to say, hey, these are the things we're looking for. That's a cue. Also, on the building, the best damn chicken. So now we're exposing the purpose, we're exposing the culture to the outside world. This is brilliant. This is what's happening. This is the next evolution of the values are on your website for everybody to see. I believe more and more organizations are going to try to differentiate, attract customers, and attract employees by exposing more and more of their culture on the outside. Here's the interview process, right? Thinking about the last bullet, print the Proposition Chicken culture document to have on hand when analyzing the answers. This is what you're trying to do. Those are cues. That's why this is important. And you can get really creative. think there's a lot of amazing ideas. One of our clients, Sunrise Banks, B Corp Bank. So they've got this wall. You pick a card, do the thing. I love it. This is a great way to kind of expose and create that activation and that behavior. So the key question you want to answer, how will employees stay connected to your culture and to your future? All right. So here they are, the 6 components of culture: purpose, values, behaviors, recognition, rituals, and cues. So I'm going to take a second, pause, check in with Brian, make sure we're doing all right. And let's answer some questions.
I think we're doing more than all right. We're doing awesome.
Awesome. Fantastic. Awesome. All right. I've got a couple questions here. Brian, have you looked through them? Tell me what you see here. What do you want to go?
So Arlene, did you get your question answered? Do you want to talk about that one?
Actually, I believe Pedro had a question, and mine was sort of related to it.
Pedro was how employees can strengthen the corporate culture. Okay, we already did that one, decided by management. I know you touched that one. Then you had yours. Let's see. Then Emily has one. Have you encountered the practice of a fulfilling work culture being used to justify or explain organizational behaviors that could harm its members and possibly contradict that organization's values, like inadequate compensation?
Great. Yeah. Oh man. Oh, sorry to laugh at it's kind of a sad reality. Actually, I just wanted to point out your video camera's on, and we're getting a little dizzy from seeing your ceiling. All right. So Ashley's walking through the kitchen, but that's fine. All right. Okay. So, have you encountered the practice of fulfilling work culture being used to justify or explain? Yes, obviously. I mean, this is articulated through the problem of burnout I think this particularly has come to a head during COVID-19, and the lack of self-care and the stress that every organization has put on. This first one, we do this because we love it, not for the money, is a common refrain for nonprofits. And it is true, but that does not justify compensating for below market values or not being able to take care of your the sort of the living wage, the basics. If your employees, if you are unable to take care of the bottom part of the kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, water, shelter, healthcare, then nothing else matters. If you're like, hey, we need to engage people, and you're like, let's work harder, that's a temporary fix, because you cannot survive, as we've all seen, for 2 years without taking care of the basics, rest and recovery. Any thoughts on that dissonance and what challenges it can pose to building a positive culture? It is imperative to be called out and say this is unsustainable, and pointing to, we have more case studies now than you can imagine. And it is hard to change culture, and it is hard to change opinions, and it is hard if it's the norm, right? We're social creatures, and we want to be part of a community that agrees, and we agree with, and we work within. So it can be really hard as an individual, but that's all the more reason that people need to come together and articulate these challenges. So when you see news stories about the employees at Apple coming together and writing a letter and having it signed by all these employees, that is a way of that's the dissonance breaking through the walls of the organization and into the public, because they weren't being heard. So I think it is a real problem. and needs to be addressed. And it's not easy, but you may need to come together with others to describe the problem and to be able to say, this is really an issue. So that's my incomplete, but at least starting point for this. Let's see. Chris started a baking club and a chocolate tasting group as a small emergent groups. As a big group, I actually started the women's network in the company, including men from the beginning that started subgroups, parent lunches. That's amazing. That's totally amazing, Chris. That's exactly right. How do you find common interests or opportunities for people to come together? I think that's incredible and particularly insightful about including men in the women's network. Just because your employee resource group is about Asian and Pacific Islanders doesn't mean it should only be those people from that heritage, or the LGBTQI group. That needs to be, there is an opportunity to connect with others and create camaraderie and a community, but there's a bigger opportunity to create connections and relationships and understanding through others. So I commend you, Chris. I think those are exactly great examples. Great example.
And the last one is back to Arlene's question. I think a good softball tossed up for you. How do leaders handle great employees, but that might not be a good fit for their culture?
This is a short versus long-term value problem, and the attraction and the desire for short-term benefits is so great that you see these high-performing. This it's almost a cliche character of the high-performing asshole. And what you have to decide as a leader is, what is it worth it? And of course, the last resort is firing somebody, and you want to try to bring them around and make sure that, give them an opportunity to really correct. But it's a problem. So that if they cannot correct, then they need to go. And I would say, don't wait too long, because the longer they're there, the more damage they will cause. So what you need to do is be able to make a case, tell a story to yourself or others that is as compelling about the future benefit. This is an exercise in prototyping. What is the benefit, or what is the damage in the future that this person immediately is going to cause? What is the limitation that personality is going to place on the organization? So that's that one. And then I think there's one more from Jill about AI. The fast forward shift to AI has been so frustrating from a customer point of view. If customer satisfaction is part of a company values, please don't push AI until you've tested it and it's very customer friendly. Yeah, we're kind of in the valley of, I don't know, disbelief or kind of, crushed expectations with AI right now. Yes, I think that's a great point, which is, if you have this articulated, really important articulation around customer centricity or customer satisfaction, don't put your customers in phone tree hell, right? Like, don't hide that phone number on the website. Okay, so as promised, how do we get to these pieces and parts of all of these? How do we get to those exercises? There's a couple opportunities, a couple resources, and I will give it to you in the same order that I actually created it. On my website, greatmondays.com, you can head to Classroom, and Classroom has a bunch of, you can download PDFs of all the exercises. Of course, I would love if you could buy the book. The book has them also really well articulated at the end of each chapter. So that's all available and free for you, not the book, but the downloadable PDF. I also created what's called a culture canvas. And that is also live on the Classroom. You can find it on my blog. The Culture Canvas is something I created in Google Sheets in order to help you put all of the parts together. You can see you've got purpose, values, and behaviors, recognition, rituals, and cues. Now, even more recent, we've actually just launched, and I don't have a slide for it, but I will stop my share so I can see you. We've just launched an incredible, oh, here we go. We've got some cool, the link to our summer school is just launched in the chat, Culture Summer School. So click on that. And what we're doing is releasing one episode a week. And what we're introducing is 6 new culture templates. Each of them take you through those exercises. They are built in Miro. So they're using Miro as this incredible tool for interactive collaboration. And it's a really powerful tool that we've embraced at my company and have seen a lot of our clients embrace and using these in workshops. So we've launched templates and you can find those. We're publishing them weekly. And so that is kind of the most advanced version. If I can't be there to help you facilitate it, then you can use these culture templates on Miro to take your team through it, whether you're together in person or distributed across the world. It's really exciting. So those are the opportunities. Lots of good content, help you get through this, because really my goal is to help more people and more companies create cultures that people want to be part of, and to be clear and compelling with that sort of business operating system. And with that, it's kind of the end of the class today. And hopefully I have convinced you why you should invest in culture and why you should do it now. And hope to start seeing you guys starting to implement that. And please follow me on LinkedIn. You can find me at AKA Josh Levine on the social networks. I'd love to connect with you. I'm always interested and available to talk about culture and interested in hearing your case studies.
Awesome. I want to give a big virtual applause, golf clap, wave, emojis, whatever you can put up there, folks. If you want to put your camera on and say thank you or unmute, this is a great time to do that. It'd be great. Any last questions, comments any of you have? Any insights that anybody wants to share? Any aha or good takeaways? You can unmute yourself and just blurt it out.
I think Cameron should start.
Yeah, I always love the just the basics of culture being the cause and effect of every decision and choice that you make. I feel like that I've used that when I've talked to students. It just really resonates for me. And I think that's the foundation, at least for me, to start thinking about how to build culture, and it's in everything that we do. And I just want to also put a pin in, I have used the culture canvas to facilitate some things on campus, and it leads to really valuable discussions, and it is a great framework. So, but yeah, I would love to hear what other key takeaways some people might have.
Anyone else want to share? I'll share why the rest of you think can get your courage up. So I also use the Culture Design Canvas as a consultant. So I pull what I think are the best practice tools in the world in general. Business model canvas, lean canvas, strategy canvas, Blue Ocean, and the Culture Design Canvas from Josh. So in my toolkit, when I'm working with a company, startup, corporate, large, doesn't matter. When I talk about innovation and growth, it all starts with the vision and purpose, because otherwise you're going in a million directions. And I talk about it from the innovation lens, right? And how do we get this cool new idea? And you got a million ideas coming, you do brainstorming, great, let's go after that. Sounds like there's a dollar tied to it. Is that tied to your purpose? And then I go back, do you have a vision statement? Do you have a purpose? Let's document it. And people want simple tools, right? A one-page canvas, which is why it's so awesome. Because if you don't have that, then your decision making is all over the board. You're like, let's just follow the dollar, but it has nothing to do with who we want to be in 20 years. And that's innovation. It's like, well, how do we innovate? Well, it may not be what you do now, but it's what you want to be. So therefore, it's a good opportunity. So let's at least look into it. And my aha moment today, Josh, was interesting and it's probably a lot deeper conversation. And I'm sure it's something that other people don't agree with. You talked about values is changing. And that's not something most people normally talk about. It's usually static. Yeah. And especially now, today's climate, COVID and diversity, inclusion, and everything else, it's pretty interesting. Got me thinking that, yeah, your values probably do change over time. If you had kids versus being single, married versus single, right? You have different values. So,
interesting.
As an organization evolves, that's really interesting. Maybe from a startup to a 20-year company, your values are going to change significantly.
Yep. Yeah, it's true. I mean, the speed at which everything's changing. Why not? This is it's an opportunity. Values are an opportunity to focus your team on the right strategy, the right behaviors. And so let's reevaluate that. If it doesn't change, fine. It doesn't have to. But if you're getting good, like I said about PagerDuty, if you're great at diversity, equity, and inclusion, then it's gonna happen. You already got that system, right? You already got the balls going. And so let's use one of those 5 limited slots to focus on something that will move the needle.
Anyone get the courage up to blurt out an insight or an aha? You don't have to have a question.
Arlene.
Hey, Josh. I appreciated the stories, bad examples, what not to do, and then something like the best damn chicken, just to illustrate the points. I always find those very compelling.
Awesome. Thank you for the feedback. Appreciate that. Yeah, Cameron has put in to the chat a link to the culture canvas. And then, Cameron. All right. So Cameron's going to start the database of bad culture horror stories. It's not out there, but I think it could be very useful for sure. One of the things that I was talking to a client and I came up with earlier this year, which was better to invest in your culture now before you also have to deal with a crisis, right? Better to deal with the culture now before you have to deal with your culture and the crisis. So it's not a nice to have, it's a have to have. And that's what I hope to, get people to understand.
Yeah, although too, we can note these, Cameron, and they're easy ones because they're big, like the one Josh here with Wells Fargo. I was actually just came on the tail end of the WorldCom fiasco, right? So when then MCI bought WorldCom and they went bankrupt and lots of fraud, and then you have Enron, same time frame. So you have all these massive corporate scandals, bad culture, bad leadership. So there's a whole bunch out there.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, it sounds like we have our project for 2023.
There we go. All right. Are there we'll give it one more shot. If not, I can wrap us up. We'll go in once.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? You got me for 5 more minutes.
Can I give you a challenge, Josh?
Yes, sure. I love a challenge.
Here's my last question. Ready? How should one handle the existing culture of a large corporation where there are departments comprised of folks that lack initiative, lack a sense of urgency, they're not collaborative, but it's huge?
Yeah. You got to start with your sphere of influence, and you've got to start with, you can only control so much, and you're going to be incredibly disappointed if you think you're going to make a huge change, but it doesn't mean you don't have control. Okay. And so my suggestion is start to focus with you and your team or your colleagues, the folks that you work with immediately, and say, hey, I know, acknowledge the problem. We're going to be more collaborative, and we can bring in, we can have a vent session and say, it's hard to get this thing from them. They're not accountable, blah, blah, blah. and at least you can have some camaraderie around that. And if it won't change or will never change, you might want to start thinking about what's next. And some people, it is a privilege to be able to change jobs. I realize that, and not everybody can, but it is a real possibility to think about. And so I understand it's hard to be part of, and maybe you need to start for yourself. Like, what are the good things about the organization? Make that list. And what are the challenging things?
I appreciate the sphere of influence, because then you can model what you prefer to see.
That's some of the best managers I've seen.
Right.
They're like, their job is, I'm going to protect you from the crap on the outside, right? And I'm gonna do what I can to run my own little business.
Right.
12, the 15, the 30, the 60 people, whatever it is. There's no reason that you need to get permission to start recognizing employees or defining some values for your group. But you don't have to. No one's going to tell you not to do that. You can do it. So
it makes me think of in Great Mondays, you talk about the culture of champions and identifying those people, and if they're in your sphere of influence, how do you recognize them? That empowers more people to be like, oh, I want to be like that individual, and elevating it. So it's I think that's a great point. And there's those tangible, practical tools that I think will connect dots if you explore the book, for sure.
Yep, the All-Stars, very good. Well, I want to say thank you to Josh again. Great session. We'll have the recording for folks, and go out and buy the book. Definitely download the PDFs, use the Miro. I'm going to definitely get on that. And we hope to see Josh again, hopefully soon, with us to do some more. And we really appreciate him and his insights today. So hook up with us on Carlson Center, and we appreciate everybody's time today.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Josh. We appreciate your time and energy and expertise.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Hey, Josh.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.